Recently, Valve has changed the rules for what kind of games can be on their store. I found this over at Gaming on Linux, where Liam Daw ran through the situation. Basically, on Valve's Steamworks page, which is where Valve keeps their documentation, they posted this in a section which was telling developers and publishers what shouldn't be posted on Steam. Content that may violate the rules and standards set forth by Steam's payment processors and related card networks and banks or internet network providers, in particular, certain kinds of adult-only content. Why are they doing this? Well, certain payment processors don't want to be associated with certain types of materials, and I've seen a lot of people jump to conclusions that it's for moral or puritanical reasons, but I think it's for more pragmatic reasons. Payment processors in the past have been sued and lost just for being the method of transactions for illegal videos in the past. Videos that should not exist, but do. And payment processors got roped into that lawsuit and were held liable. Now, if you ask me, I don't think that payment processors should have been found liable for something that they were completely unaware of. That's like suing Apple because someone used an iPhone to film an illegal video. I'm all for going after those that create and consume this kind of stuff. It is illegal for a reason, but to rope in a payment processor for something that they didn't really have any part in is crazy. So now they're justifiably thinking, we don't want to get sued again, so let's do what we can to limit our liability. Honestly, that seems like a pretty reasonable move on the part of the payment processors. I think that there are a lot of different perspectives to this, and I'm not going to sit here and say that my perspective is the right one, but here's how I look at it. I have no interest in playing games like this. They are marked as adult only and can be easily hidden based on personal preference, which I've done. I would assume that they would also already be hidden if an account's age is lower than 18, though I don't think that that would actually do anything because it's trivial to just make another account and then lie about your age, but that is a completely different topic. My point is that there is already a mechanism that allows the end user to make sure that this kind of stuff isn't seen on their store shelves. And if you're old like me, video rental stores used to have extra rooms where they would keep adult-only movies. I think before this change, that those video stores would be a decent metaphor for something like this. But now, basically, the credit card companies are demanding that Valve tear out those rooms and just don't sell that stuff at all. Now, perhaps you look at the list of games that were delisted after this rule change and you've decided nothing was lost. And I wouldn't really disagree with you, though I do consider games to be art, even the ones that I don't like or would never play. But that's a massive discussion that doesn't really lend itself to a news video. But my point is that this is a slippery slope. Let me give you an example. If you've seen the trailers for the latest Superman movie, which is awesome, by the way, go watch it, you'll have a good time. But in the trailer, there's a moment where Superman and Lois are kissing. Well, in India, that scene, multiple scenes, was too risque for the theaters, and allegedly those scenes were removed. So if payment processors based in the United States can ask Valve to remove these kind of games from their stores, a way to shield themselves from legal liability later down the road, well then what's to stop payment processors from any country from asking Valve to remove games that have any nudity, or any drug use, or any guns, or any violence of any kind? Because those payment processors don't like it. Maybe not for legal liability reasons, but maybe they just don't like it for moral or puritanical reasons. Like I said, Valve is dancing atop a slippery slope, and one slip up, well, we know what happens to Jack and Jill at the end of the day. The big question is, should Valve be allowed to pick what's on their store? Some people don't want anyone choosing what games they can and can't buy, and they call that censorship. I disagree with that. I say Valve is a private company and they get to pick what goes on their store. Censorship is different. Censorship is when the government tells you what you can and can't see. Stores can decide what's on their shelves. That is perfectly fine by me. So for Valve to remove these games, I don't care. That's fine. Especially because anyone that wants to make a game like this can just make a website and sell their game on that website. It's no different than built-in stores on Mac and PC. There's an app store, and yet I have bought tons of apps that are not on the App Store simply because Apple won't let them be on the App Store, or because the devs don't want to give 30% of their revenue to the store owner. So for Valve to remove games like this, I really don't care. And I can already hear the comments, but Bill, you just talked about a slippery slope. What happens when they remove the games that you do want to play? At which point I would say, well, that sucks, but it's their store and I'll just have to take my money elsewhere. But some might argue that the payment processors are the ones that are effectively removing these games. It isn't really Valve. And maybe that's true, maybe it's not. Valve certainly made it seem that way by the way that they phrased it. And if I'm honest, I bet Valve probably would have just left things alone, but they got pressured from the people who bring them money and they folded. So should payment processors be dictating to Valve what games should and shouldn't be on the digital shelves? I think in a reasonable world, probably not, because these payment processors are kind of the only game in town when it comes to the internet. It isn't like we can pay in cash, so they could effectively stop any website from selling any game that they didn't like, because it's not like there's other options to pay for things. Speaking of games getting delisted, John Wick Hex, which was released in October 2019, is being delisted on July 17th. If you've already bought it, you can still download it, but you won't be able to buy it anymore. They didn't say the reason, but most of the time it's due to licensing issues, and this absolutely drives me up the wall. I have said a million times, video games are art, even the ones I don't like. And yes, the companies knew the terms of the deals when they signed them, but if you ask me, when you secure licensing to make a video game, a movie, a TV show, that should be in perpetuity for that game. What I mean is, if I get a license for a song to put in my game, I shouldn't ever have to come back and relicense that song for the same game. At no point should that license expire for that game. Games are art, and art shouldn't have an expiration date. $650 and $975 are the leaked prices of the recently announced Xbox handhelds, both made by Asus and both basically ROG allies with more ergonomic casing and slightly different hardware configurations. The Xbox Ally, which is the white one, comes with 16 gigs of RAM and half a terabyte of storage, has been leaked to cost around 599 euros, which converts to about $650 right now. The Xbox Ally X, which is the black one, which has 24 gigs of RAM, a full terabyte of storage, as well as a bigger battery and better triggers, has been leaked to cost 899 euros, which would convert to $975 right now. Though companies don't always match prices across the pond. Sometimes something costs 599 euros will also cost $599 in the States. Sometimes they won't. That remains to be seen, but it is important to note that I'm 99% sure that these prices are pre-tariff prices. So those prices could go up anywhere from 10 to 20 to 30%. But leaving tariffs out right now, because that ridiculous situation changes every 15 seconds, these prices are right in line with what we were expecting. And yeah, $700 and $1,000 is a lot to ask for a handheld, but it also isn't that far off from other handhelds in the market. The ROG Ally X currently sells for $800. The Legion Go S currently sells for $830 right now. I'm talking about the more expensive ones because I wouldn't recommend buying the Z2 Go chipset version. The performance just isn't there. On the podcast, I think we even predicted prices very close to these prices. I think I predicted $1,000 for the black one. PC gamers are used to these kind of prices. I think, however, the Xbox logo is going to bring in more traditional console gamers, and traditional console gamers expect things to be a little bit cheaper. I think console players will pick it up and they'll say this thing is amazing because they're used to being locked to their TVs, but the prices are going to make them take a step back. For me, I'm far less excited about the hardware and far more interested in seeing if Microsoft can make their operating system get the hell out of my way. If they can do that, that's going to be a game changer. Look, I hate cheaters in games. I hate them. I'm fine with programs that detect cheating, but I'm also not fine with programs that live at the kernel level of my computer and have access to every single part of it. Is that because I, myself, would like to cheat? No, cheating is boring and it ruins other people's funds, and I'm not an asshole. But It's because I don't trust the companies that make the anti-cheat software to not step on a rake eventually. It isn't because I think that they're maliciously spying on me or stealing my information and selling it to the highest bidder. It's because I think most of them, most of the time, are mostly incompetent. Are they better at making anti-cheat software than I am? Sure, but that doesn't mean that they won't make mistakes, and because of that, I'm not a fan of anti-cheat or anti-tamper software. Not because I want to do anything nefarious, but because I don't trust these companies to make software good enough that it won't eventually get my computer compromised. Well, the skate game from EA is using their Javelin anti-cheat software, and that means that you won't be able to play it on your Steam Deck or any Linux operating system. EA said this: "At EA and Full Circle, we believe in the power of positive play. In Skate, we want to ensure everybody has a great time, but if something goes sideways, it's important to empower players to let us know quickly. We have EA Javelin anti-cheat monitoring for any unfair gameplay issues and in-game reporting for other issues like griefing. There are also numerous privacy options like blocking, teleporting, spectating, and disabling the ability of others to move your build kit items." They further clarified, "We want to bring Skate to as many platforms as possible and will continue to listen to feedback and look for the feasibility at adding new platforms in the future, but for early access launch, macOS, SteamOS, Proton, Linux will not be supported." Here's the thing with this though. This is an MMO. It's an online-only MMO game where you have to connect to their servers in order to play. I would assume that you would also have to have an account in order to play. And if that's the case, then they have all of the telemetry that they need on their servers in order to verify when somebody reports that somebody's cheating. So let's say that you see me skating in this game and I'm doing some weird stuff. You report it to EA. EA then looks at the server logs and sees, yeah, that's a weird thing. That guy's probably cheating. Let's put a temporary ban on him and then reach out and find out more information and either reinstate if we're wrong or don't reinstate if we're wrong. But at the same time, I don't make software. Maybe I'm completely wrong about that. You all can let me know in the comment section down below. Next, I think I've seen people argue that, well, it probably wouldn't have run very well on a Steam Deck anyway. There's a lot of systems out there that aren't Steam Decks that run Linux. I just built kind of a beastly Steam console for my TV, and it's running Linux. So that means that I can't play this game either, and that sucks. Though, to be honest, it's an always online MMO skateboarding game that will rely heavily on microtransactions, so I probably wasn't going to play it anyway. But it isn't really about the game Skate itself, it's just another example of a problem that Valve has that they don't really have any good way to solve on their own. I have a whole video about how Valve is kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place when it comes to anti-cheat and DRM. I'll link that down below, but I got a lot of pushback on that video. People seem to think that I was blaming Valve for this. That's not the case. One argument that I left out when I made that video was that I don't think Valve can really do anything about this, because if they said you're not allowed to put games on our store unless you use our anti-cheat software, which isn't kernel level stuff, well then I'm sure that they would end up getting sued for monopolistic practices, or at least they would get accused of monopolistic practices. And I'm sure that there are tons and tons of lawyers looking at Valve and just waiting for them to make the wrong move. So I don't know that this is a problem that they can fix, but it is absolutely a problem that is affecting them and their customers, and it sucks. If you want to check out that video, like I said, it is linked down below. By the way, I just wanted to say a quick thank you to everyone who's been clicking on that like button or leaving comments or even just subscribing, because all of those things help the channel grow. So just know that I appreciate you. One of my all-time favorite games is BioShock, and the creator of BioShock, Ken Levine, now has a new game on the way. It's called Judas, and I am incredibly hyped for it. Not only because Levine is in charge of it, but genuinely, this game seems interesting. I think last year I was listening to the Friends Per Second podcast, and they talked to the team that was making the game, and they got to play a small portion of the game. I can't remember the specifics, it was a while back, but the vibe that I remember from the conversation was that they really enjoyed what they saw a lot, but it was very early days and there's a lot more work for them to do. Anyway, the game looks awesome. I can't wait for it. And Levine's recent comments only ramped up my hype for the game because he was recently talking to Lawrence Sutag of Night Dive Studios. Games Radar summed up the conversation, and this is what Levine had to say. Judas is a very old school game. You buy the game and you get the whole thing. There's no online component. There's no live service because everything we do is in service of telling the story and transporting the player. This is no diss on any developers who have done that because look, games are expensive to make, and we're very fortunate to work at a company where they believe in us enough to say, okay, you've been working on this thing for a long time. It's going to cost a reasonable amount of money, and we're not going to push any of that stuff on you. So there you have it. Now we are in an era where games like Judas, like Baldur's Gate 3, like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, like Claire Obscure Expedition 33 are considered to be, quote, old school games because the suits behind those games. And you know what? I find that insulting to the people who are making these games. I don't like calling them suits, but the business managers behind those games are the ones, they are not forcing secondary monetization down the throats of the devs that make the games. Usually when I refer to suits, it's usually a derogatory way. It's the people who are in charge of the spreadsheet that determines whether or not a game is going to be monetized to hell and back. These guys are doing it right. And unfortunately, that's old school. But I guess old school is awesome and should be applauded. Levine goes on to say these are games that are really traditional single-player games, and they don't have that kind of monetization in them. And I think the audiences reward those games, especially in the AAA space, because they can get so expensive that people want other methods of monetization. I'm just grateful that we're allowed to not do that because that just frees us up to purely design the game for the player's experience. I will say that I agree with what Levine is saying here. And look, I have been a defender of microtransactions that do not affect gameplay. So things like cosmetics, that kind of thing. But all too often, when you have that kind of, any kind of secondary monetization model that goes on top of a game that you are already paying full price for, I think what happens is the devs are forced to make decisions that they otherwise wouldn't make that influences the way that we play the games and kind of takes away from it. So I appreciate the things that these kind of devs are doing. The entire discussion is really interesting, and I will leave a link to it in the description down below that like button if you want to check it out. I gotta be honest with you, I thought that this was going to happen quite a while ago. One of the best video game adaptations, in my opinion, was Fallout. Walton Goggins, Ella Purnell, and Aaron Moten were just amazing in that show, and it has one of my all-time favorite lines when the ghoul, masterfully played by Walton Goggins, says this:
"I'd offer you one of these cherry tomatoes, but you got a hole in your neck."
And I don't think that I'm alone. That show really got people looking forward to another Fallout game, or any Fallout game. Take a look at the SteamDB graph for Fallout 4. That massive spike that goes up to nearly 187,000 players took place right after the show came out. Here's the same graph for Fallout 3, and here's the same graph for the original Fallout. And I'm willing to bet that when Bethesda's Todd Howard saw what Amazon did with the show, he had very mixed feelings about it. On one hand, the show's amazing. It was pleasing to both video game fans like myself and people who'd never touched a controller. But on the other hand, he had to be really disappointed that they didn't have a new Fallout game ready to launch alongside the show. Well, get ready to step back in the wasteland because there are rumors that Fallout 5 has been officially greenlit. This was leaked on an episode of the Xbox 2 podcast where Jez Corden said this: "From what I've heard, it was a case of, do we want to sink a ton of money into getting this Project Blackbird to a point where it can compete with established players in a market, or do we want to allocate that investment towards making Fallout 5? Well, it seems like Project Blackbird has been canceled in the latest round of mass firings from Microsoft. Let's just assume that this rumor is a trumer. Who's going to be working on this game? We know that Bethesda is working on DLC for Starfield, and we also know that they've been working on Elder Scrolls 6. I know that Bethesda is a big developer, but stretching too thin is a real danger. Neither of those games seem like small games, but if Microsoft wants to take the money that they were going to spend on Project Blackbird and invest it in Fallout instead, I'm okay with that because I would love to see another Fallout game, and it's way better than the alternative, which is Microsoft investing in AI instead of video games at all. In the 8 years that we've had Nintendo Switch, I've been a pretty big fan of Nintendo Switch Online, not because I like paying to play online, though that's par for the course on consoles. It's also not because I love Nintendo's Classic Collection, though that's a nice bonus. But one of the features that I really liked was Nintendo's game voucher program. If you didn't ever try it out, basically Nintendo would give you the ability to buy 2 game vouchers for $100, and those vouchers would work on Nintendo's first-party games, which generally would cost around $60, essentially lowering the price of each game to $50 per game. Though it is important to point out that the vouchers were only available at certain times of the year, so whenever they became available and Nintendo would make that announcement, I would look at the release schedule for games that I would like to buy, and I would pick up that many vouchers and just bank them. This is really smart on Nintendo's part because, number one, they get the money faster. Sure, it's less than the $60 cost of the game. We're talking the Switch 1 era here, by the way, but I'm sure that there were people that bought these vouchers and then never cashed them in. And on top of that, it probably drove a lot of people towards digital sales, which is something every publisher would prefer. So I'll bet that there's almost a wash using this program. Plus, it's just good PR, and it gives users another reason to subscribe to Nintendo Switch Online. Well, that reason is about to be gone because Nintendo just announced that they're ending that program. As of 11:59 p.m. Pacific Time, January 30th, 2026, it will no longer be possible to purchase Nintendo Switch game vouchers. Any vouchers you purchase on or before that date will work exactly as they currently do. Unused vouchers expire 12 months after the date of purchase. I have to admit, I have not bought a set of vouchers from Nintendo's system in years, but it's basically because I've been playing all of my games on Steam Deck instead and only playing Nintendo's big first-party games. But basically, every time I did, it meant that I was saving $20 because every single time you bought them, you would get $120 worth of games for $100. With game prices everywhere, moving up to $70 or even $80 in some cases, I can see why Nintendo wouldn't want to take a hit that big. But on the other hand, they were willing to take a $20 hit before. So if game prices are going up, which they are, then instead of canceling this program, just raise the price of the vouchers so that it's still a discount, but not that much of a discount. It was a nice bonus, and it sucks that Nintendo is taking that bonus away, especially at a time when the buying power of consumers seems to be dropping significantly. I've had quite a few people reach out asking about the dbrand situation for Nintendo Switch 2. Just to catch everybody up on this, basically dbrand made a case for the Nintendo Switch 2. It allowed you to put the Joy-Cons on and off the system while still protecting them and making them more ergonomic. And I used it and I was like, this is friggin' awesome. It makes the Switch 2 so much better to hold. However, they ran into a bit of a snafu, and I've been thinking about what I wanted to say about this quite a bit. First of all, I have to point out that dbrand is a channel sponsor, so it could appear that I have a conflict of interest here. That said, when I used the kill switch case on my Switch 2, I did not notice this issue until after the first reports went out. Once I saw the issue, I tested my unit, and I can confirm that my unit has the same exact issues that others were reporting. However, my experience with dbrand in the past when they've had products that don't live up to customer expectations has been that they make it right with the customer. Back when the Steam Deck first came out, dbrand launched their original kill switch case for the Steam Deck, and they ran into an issue where the magnetically attached kickstand was slowing the fan speeds of the Steam Deck. They called it their $1 million mistake. They designed a new model, and they replaced the magnetic units with an interlocking version of the kickstand instead. Then they shipped that out to anybody who wanted one that paid for the original unit. When this was first pointed out to dbrand on the Nintendo Switch 2, they gave a very tone-deaf response, which is totally in line with their marketing shtick, where they are generally rude because they pretend to be robots and they pretend to be robots that think humans are really dumb. I get it. It was kind of funny at first, but Over time, I think that it's worn thin, and I personally think that dbrand should abandon this tactic as it only has ever gotten them in hot water. I personally don't think that they should have responded with an admittedly reductive "you're holding it wrong" statement, because they were channeling Apple there, and that was a bad move on their part. But after people let them know that that was an unacceptable position, they did apologize and they did commit to making it right. I like dbrand products and I trust that they will make this right, but only time will tell. They now have a little video showing off that they have figured out how to make it work and it doesn't fall off anymore. I suggest that people take a look at their full statements posted on Reddit. There are links in the description down below. The Stop Killing Games movement just got another big boost. One of the presidents of the European Parliament, and I'm not going to try and pronounce this person's name because I'll mess it up, publicly said this about the Stop Killing Games campaign. "I stand with the people who started this citizen initiative. I signed and will continue to help them. A game once sold belongs to the consumer, not the company." This is amazing news because it means that the people who make these kind of decisions are starting to pay attention to this matter. You know what? Let me give you a quick catch up for those of you that missed the more recent episodes. It's all about online-only games dying off because publishers shut down their servers and don't give players a way to run their own servers. Last week, a publisher lobbyist group put out a tone-deaf, patronizing statement trying to gaslight everybody into thinking that consumers were being unreasonable. I don't know how the European Union Parliament works. The only parliament I know about is the P-Funk All-Stars, but the more attention that the Stop Killing Games movement can get, the better it is. Shadow Labyrinth drops today. If you didn't know, this is actually a Pac-Man game, and it is the strangest take I've seen on Pac-Man yet. First of all, it is, well, I'm not going to say based on, but it's in the same world as the Pac-Man episode of the Amazon show Secret Levels, which I need to watch. I watched the Secret Levels episode of Dungeons and Dragons. That was freaking awesome, and I haven't checked out any of the others. Let me know, what are your favorite episodes of Secret Levels in the comments down below, by the way. Anyway, Shadow Labyrinth is a Metroidvania game set in a dark and gritty world. The art style, I would say, very much reminds me of another Metroidvania game. This one's a Metroidvania Souls-like called Grime, where you play as this character who has like a black hole for a head, and it allows you to like pull in your the souls that you're collecting as you go through and kill things from around you. It's a really cool game. I didn't get very far in it because the bosses were too hard and I didn't spend enough time with it in order to, as the kids say, get good. Shadow Labyrinth, you play as this guy in a cloak, and Pac-Man is an orb that follows you around. And from time to time, it seems like you even get a chance, like through certain power-ups, to take control of Pac-Man. Check back next week for reviews on it. It's definitely a game that's on my radar. I've always been a huge fan of Pac-Man. Yes, even on the Atari 2600, because when I was a kid, that's all we had, and it was good enough. But I'm not going to run out and pick up Shadow Labyrinth right away because I want to see what other people say about it first. It's definitely interesting, but really odd. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 Remastered was released on the 11th and has been getting some decent reviews. Honestly, I thought that the reduction in the track list from the original would be enough to make people grumpy about it, but I guess I was wrong. For me, I never played these games, so I don't have nostalgia for them. I don't care about the track list as much as other people would, so all of those complaints would have been lost on me, but it's currently sitting at around 82 on Metacritic, and it has a user score of 6.8. Both GameSpot and Cultura Geek gave the game a score of 80, which is pretty close to the average. And here's what Cultura Geek said. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 doesn't try to reinvent anything because it didn't need to. Its goal is to capture the mood and nostalgia and bring it into the present with better visuals and tighter gameplay, and in that sense, it carries all of the strengths of modern games and all of the nostalgia of the past. It is what it is, and it doesn't need to be anything more. GameSpot said that Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 is a phenomenal game of skate, one that fans would flock to without hesitation if it weren't for some of the strange decisions regarding the game's career mode and Pro Skater 4 levels. Some of the changes feel needless, and overall Pro Skater 4 just doesn't fit as well into the same structure as the original 3 games. It's also disappointing that newcomers won't be able to experience the 4th game the way it was originally intended. Once the initial disappointment fades, however, you are left with a remake that still handles as well as these games ever have, and that's something that's worth playing no matter who you are. Donkey Kong Bonanza dropped on the 17th, and I have to say I am enjoying it. So far, I've played through about 2 hours, I think, and at this point, I have 3 skill points that I've purchased. I've unlocked 1 of the transformations, so I'm really early in the game, but I'm sure that we're going to be discussing more about this game on the next episode of the podcast, so stay tuned for that. But it's currently sitting at 91 on Metacritic, and so far, there's no user score yet because the game just came out. PC Mag said, by swapping the little plumber with the big ape, Donkey Kong Bonanza delivers a potent blend of action, creative level design, and environmental destruction that boldly reinvents the blockbuster Nintendo platformer formula. Inverse gave Bonanza a perfect score. They said, every time I get to a new layer, I immediately ignore the story objective and spend half a dozen hours just smashing things around like a toddler in a sandbox. Which is something I feel like I'm experiencing as well. I kind of forget about the main objective and I just start smashing things. It's almost a little bit too distracting to be able to just wander around smashing things looking for gold and bananas. It's fun, but it might be a struggle if you're prone to getting distraction. As far as performance, the game runs fine for me so far. You definitely do see frame dips during transitions between different levels or during cutscene transitions, but during the actual gameplay, so far, everything has felt really smooth. For the Indie Spotlight today, I wanted to talk about a game that we've actually mentioned on the podcast before. It's a roguelike Peggle game, but you build the board instead of having the board built for you. Then you drop the ball and then you set everything off. I played the demo and it's really fun. It's got a great combination of randomness and theory crafting so that you can try and break the game with certain combinations of pegs that you put on your board. If you liked Balatro or Peglin, Billionaire might be right up your alley. It's currently about $12 on Steam and it plays really good on just about any hardware. Link down below that like button. And that's going to do it for this episode of NerdNest News. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Stay rad, everybody.